Hey guys, back again with another installment in the series where I talk about Jonathan Kellerman's books. For those not familiar with this series, this is a book of murder mysteries that I just tend to reread in my downtime. It's my part of my relaxation, I guess. It's familiar characters, they're familiar stories, and I enjoy them, and so I read these books, when sometimes if I have a few minutes when I first get up, at red lights, in line at the bank, before I go to bed, just whatever little bits of time that I might have. And I've read and reread the entire series in order many times, and out of order, and have been, pretty attached to the books and the characters and things of that nature, and so there's certain things that stand out to me that I like and that don't like and that bother me, and I like to discuss them. And that's what this series is about. So, again, this is not a series for people that haven't read the books. So if you haven't read these books, I advise you to read them first before coming back. And this video in particular will definitely have spoilers. Because the video that's up now, the book that's up now, Silent Partner, is one that I've never fully understood. And so I've got some questions, and it's impossible for me to ask those questions without spoilers. So let's talk about it. So some of my questions here might be stupid. I have never fully understood Silent Partner. It's probably my fault. I discovered the Kellerman books out of order, and I read them out of order until, a few years ago I started reading them in order. And at some point during that process, I realized I'd overlooked a book. I never saw Silent Partner for some reason. It just wasn't at the library, wasn't at the bookstores. And so I finally realized I was missing a book. And it answered some questions because there's some things that happen in this book that are relevant to the overall series that I was like, that doesn't make sense that it jumps from here to here. Well, that's why. So in the book before, Alex is single. No, sorry, screwed that up already. The book before, Alex is with Robin. After this book, he is single. In the book before, Milo has a horrible captain trap, I think. And after this book, he does not. But I feel like this book, it definitely solved a lot of issues for me. But it created some new ones because parts of it just definitely don't make sense to me. And again, part of that is probably me being stupid. And part of that, I think, is that this book has some flaws. So let's talk about it. The breakup with Robin makes little sense, and Alex does a lot of things, particularly in the flashbacks, that seem out of character for him. More importantly, I don't think I ever figure out who Sharon, Sherry, and Shirley, when I say Shirley, I mean the second Shirley. I've referred to her as Shirley Jr., even though they're not mother and daughter, but the younger Shirley were. And Alex, throughout the book, tries to dissect the things that Sharon and Sherry told him and figure out what's true and what's not, and I don't think I ever really figure that out in terms of what's true and what's not in the context of the book. So, here's the points of discussion. So, in the beginning of the book, they reference, I think Robin's either in Japan or talking about going to Japan, or she's refusing an offer from Japan, and this just keeps happening, that over the course of Robin's career, there's an offer from Japan for her to make a line of guitars, and she either says yes, doesn't do it, or there's something in between. She either goes to Japan or she doesn't, and it's a plot device that's used often, but it's not like she keeps getting offers. It's like it's the same plot device. Like every time it acts like it's the first time it happened. Interestingly enough, Japan is probably, outside of America, they make the best guitars. If you can get a Japanese-made guitar, that's a good guitar. My guitar that I have that was Prince's was a Japanese guitar. So that's, it actually, in the context of musical instruments, Japan makes a lot of sense. But, yeah, it's interesting. I think in this book she actually goes there. In other books, she just turns down the offer. But it always seems like it's just like the first time, and I think it's just a plot device. And I really would like to see a timeline of Castagna Lutherie over the course of the book series, like her shops, her Japan, her line of guitars. At some point, I'll make that if nobody beats me to it, but it'd be very complicated, and you have to read all the books. So, earlier on in the book, they reference a Blaylock professor. Cruz is being appointed and anointed a Blaylock professor. And then we later find out in the book that means that there was an endowment from the Blaylock family. But Alex and Larry are talking about it over the phone. He's like, can you believe it? A Blaylock professor? Like they know what that is. And like, what is it then? If it's not because their name is on the endowment and you didn't know who that was, then why are you talking about? So, what's a Blaylock professor? The breakup between Alex and Robin never seemed legitimate to me. She leaves him because he's too perfect, and she preferred the burnt-out Alex because he was troubled. Later in the books, she prefers the post-burnout Alex because he's safe, not troubled. There's also a fight in one of the books where Alex doesn't like Robin becoming independent, and that just seems kind of out of character. Alex seems like a more secure guy than that. I've talked in the past about how Kellerman's nicknames don't seem authentic. Here, Larry calling Alex D feels weird. I mean, both of their last names are D. I mean, I get called D, but it's my first initial. Nobody calls me N, you know. Every Eric I know goes by E, never their last name. So it just doesn't seem like a thing, and it feels really weird. And like, you know, like someone out of touch saying, I wonder what nicknames are. And the only thing I can think of where somebody goes by their last name would be Sonny T from Prince's camp. Prince's childhood bass and guitar teacher who later went on to tour with him. His full name is Lloyd Thompson. They call him Sonny, and Prince would call him Sonny T on stage, so his close friends often will just say, what's up, T? But it's, you know, that seems like a one-off. The whole bit with the station wagon in the beginning of the book, was that Larry's station wagon? He never explicitly says. He implies that it was, but he also implies that the station wagon is slovenly. Larry seems like he'd have a decent car, he'd take care of it. And then the whole thing at the end, it seems like you know, Larry doesn't even tip them, and Larry seems like a decent guy. Why wouldn't he tip him? So I never understood that. Okay, so here's a big bone that I have to pick with Kellerman, and this got me into a lot of arguments on Facebook. There's a black woman in Sharon's college class, and Kellerman references her as having a henna'd afro. And if you have black hair, when I say black hair, you mean black people hair, black hair textures, henna is used as a conditioner, but it doesn't change the color unless you've already bleached your hair or you've already gone gray. White people will use henna as a hair dye. Black people will use henna as a treatment or a conditioner. So what does he mean by henna'd hair? Like, it doesn't change the color. Does he mean, like, does he think it changes the curl pattern? I don't understand what his reference is with henna'd hair. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google henna'd hair, and it's all pictures of white women, but Kellerman uses it to refer to black women, so I don't get it. So here's another, that's a kind of obscure reference. Here's another obscure reference that if you follow my YouTube channel, you'll understand why this bothers me, but probably most people won't even notice it. Alex drives by, I think it's a water treatment plant, and he describes it as being lit with arc lights, or arc lamps. Arc lamps were actually the precursor to the incandescent light bulb, and if you've heard of the Chicago Iroquois Theater fire, it's one of the biggest fires in history in terms of deaths. I think 600 people died. It was, you know, a huge theater in Chicago. It was late 1800s, early 1900s, and that was started by an arc lamp, which generates light with arcing. As you can imagine why that would be dangerous, and it got too close to like a theater curtain or something like that, and the whole building started on fire. But after incandescent lights became commonplace, arc lamps were pretty much only used for like movie projectors, ultraviolet lights, lighthouses, a few things like that. But they pretty much went out of common use, and then that's since World War II. I don't think they've even been commonly used in those things. So it's almost certainly not arc lamps that Alex was seeing, but it's very interesting that Kellerman knows that reference because it's a very obscure lighting reference. And I'm guessing that what Alex actually saw would be high-intensity discharge lamps, mercury vapor or sodium. I don't think metal halide was that popular by the time that this book was set. So depending on what color he intended them to be, orange versus blue, they were probably either high-pressure sodium or mercury vapor. But it's such a weird thing that he would call them arc lamps, because hardly anybody, unless you study lighting, has heard of arc lamps. Okay, Alex has a therapist, his own therapist, who I think was one of his mentors, named Ada Small. and I'm curious to see if she reoccurs as a character. In the following book, Time Bomb, Alex basically says he cut ties with her, but I'm curious if she comes back again. Alex frequently talks about making a living playing guitar in wedding bands, cover bands, dance bands in his younger days. And he lives in L.A. So to do that in L.A., you got to be good because the regular working session guys are also doing that to make some extra money. So he's got to be a heck of a guitar player, which I believe. You know, Robin asked him out in part because of his guitar playing, and he's clearly a great musician, but it doesn't really seem like he plays that much, and he's semi-retired, so he's got time to do it. When you're that good of a musician, you can say, I'm giving it up, but the bug always comes back. So I feel like that's kind of missing from his character, and he's going to, if he is true to character, he's going to get back into playing more at some point in the book series. He'll pick up a guitar more than just, here and there in the books. It seems like he's got an acoustic guitar lying around. What else do I got? Oh, yeah. So he talks about, in this book, he talks about when he was playing in bar bands, he would, basically lived on all the bar food he could eat between sets. And maybe things were different in the 70s, but I've played in lots of bar bands, and they often do not give you free food. They act like they're doing you a favor by letting you play for whatever little money they're paying, and if you want food, you have to pay full price. I remember this very clearly because there have definitely been times in my career when whether or not I ate in a day depended on whether or not there was food at the gig, because I needed the gig money to pay my rent. So, in the clubs that treated me well and fed me, I always remembered and appreciated, but usually it wasn't all the food you could eat. Usually you were lucky to get one thing. So maybe things were different in the 70s. Okay, there's an interaction in this book where some woman asks him out at the grocery store, and when he very kindly lets her down, she storms off and says all the cute ones are gay. And I don't think that's usually how that goes down. I mean, forward women typically either they take rejection fine or they just keep going. But the whole all the cute ones are gay is not really like a thing that seems to happen that often. It felt false to me. Okay. Leland Belding. Is he based on a real person? I know in other books, and I love that they reference him continually in the universe. They reference him and Howard Hughes together. So in Sharon's dissertation, she talks about Jay and Jana. Are those two of Sharon's personalities? Or is she talking about herself and Sherry? Why is Billy Vidal referred to as a sheik? When I read the book the first time, I pictured him with a turban because of that. But then I realized when I read it again, they keep talking about his hair. So it's not that. Why is he a sheik? So you guys probably remember Olivia Brinkerman. She's been in a lot of the books. I'm guessing everybody that reads the books loves her. And in the first book, Alex and Robin go over there for dinner, or dessert and coffee, I think. They're eating fig bars and things of that nature. Brownies. But in this book, Alex phones her, and he doesn't realize that he's 2 minutes from her house. And he seems to have a pretty good sense of geography. So, did he forget where she lived, or is that just a continuity issue? And yes, Olivia turns up in the books well through to the end, and given that the books follow Alex's timeline from 81 to 2021, and she was old in the first book, she must be immortal. Because people do seem to age in the books. I'm glad, though. I like her. What else? So, a significant setting in this book is Willow Glen, California, which is referred to as like a backwater speck. And in reality, it's like a rich suburb. So that's interesting. They refer to somebody who's, mentally deficient in the book as retarded. And it's weird hearing that word because now it's considered to be a slur. And only a few years ago, that was an okay thing to say to somebody who was, mentally lacking. They talk about a well-researched, well-published doctor performing abortions, and Alex, in his inner monologue, says he can't reconcile an abortionist with someone scholarly. And that seems odd to me, because most doctors perform abortions when it's medically necessary. And lots of them volunteer and do it. In later books, there's definitely an abortion clinic that is... it factors in, and there's a lot of respect for that. So I don't know. It seems like there's an anti-abortion bias. But granted, when the abortion doctor in this book was referenced, it would have been illegal. So it would have been somebody breaking the law. Still, I would think Alex would look at it as somebody, risking doing something illegal to help people, save lives and things of that nature. Okay. Hope Blaylock says that Alex mentioned her daughter to gain entry, but Alex's conversation when he's trying to enter is in the book. It's not something that happens, off screen or off script. And he doesn't specifically mention the daughter. He mentions the exploits of the Marchesa de Orano. Maybe, and that's the closest thing. Cyril Trapp is referred to as CT, and that's another nickname that just rings false to me. In the final segment of the book, Sharon uses her right hand, and Alex says, "Oh, at least I finally know what side of the mirror I'm seeing." And so I have to go back in the book and be like, okay, is Sharon the right-handed one? Is Sherry the right-handed one? And I'm pretty sure that Sharon is, in fact, the right-handed one consistently through the book. Because at one point I read it, and I thought, okay, so is this Sherry all along, and Sharon's dead? And I was so confused. I told you this book confuses me. So how was the book supposed to wrap up? Initially, Vidal and Sharon talk about it like it was going to be three people living happily ever after. Alex and Sharon and Shirley, too. And they were going to live in the little bubble. Vidal says that Sharon is a very sick woman. I'm assuming he means mentally. So then why would he have thought that would have been okay? And then Alex goes and decompresses alone in a shitty motel room for a week. Milo never asks questions about how everything resolved. Like, the book doesn't really have a good resolution. And I think part of my issue with the book, too, is that most of these books seem like something that you can believe happened. Like, yeah, that seems realistic. Like, okay, maybe there aren't that many serial killers out there, but this otherwise rings true. This book just seems kind of surreal. It doesn't really, the plot doesn't really seem that believable. And, but I think it would make a great movie. And maybe if it was made into a movie, I'd understand it better. Okay, so those are all my notes from this book. Like I said, you can tell that this one I struggled with. And I struggled with going through these notes. It's just, it's a lot going on. Time Bomb is up next, which is a book that I like, and it'll be a lot easier. I hope you guys are having a great holiday season. And I hope that you are enjoying these vlogs, and please comment and subscribe and do all the fun stuff. So, thanks for watching.